Awesome. Thank you all for joining today. Today we have Claudio with us. Claudio will be speaking about finding the bug in UX. So I'm looking forward for this talk today. Claudio, it's all yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Bhaskar. Thanks everybody for joining in. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, I think you have to allow me to do the screen sharing.
Yeah, let me go ahead and do it quick. Yeah, you should be able to do it now.
All right, yes, that's great. So let me share that screen over there.
Meanwhile, thank you all for joining today on Zoom as well. And we are also live streaming on YouTube. So if you have any questions, you're always welcome to share them on YouTube chat. And in Zoom, you're always welcome to feel free to raise hands, ask questions, and we look forward to keep this session as interactive as possible.
Excellent. All right, I've rearranged things. So if you have questions or comments during the talk, feel free to use the chat window there. I should be seeing it here as we go. But other than that, let's get this thing rolling. So we have until, we have an hour, right? You guys are on a different time zone. Is that right?
We are on EST, so 6 p.m. EST is the start, and an hour is all we got.
Excellent. All right. Okay, excellent. So this talk, I actually have like two separate titles for this talk. I started it with UX for devs, making things look pretty useful, because there's a very big misconception from developers thinking that UX is just about making buttons look pretty and change the colors of our software, and it's not that at all. It's about making the things that we build look pretty useful to the user experience, which may or may not include UI, the user interface. So in this talk, I'm going to go through and I would introduce myself, but it's going to be about how developers can look at user experience, paying more attention to it, being more careful with it, or putting care into it that other people will notice, and how to leverage our skills as software developers to help out with UX efforts. So just a quick note about myself. My name is Claudio Lassala. You have my email information up there on the slide. So if afterwards you think of questions or comments or concerns, or you just want to reach out to continue the conversation, please feel free to write down my information there. Also my blog, where I'm always writing blog posts on related topics. I've been a software developer for since the late 90s or so. So I've been doing this for quite some time now. I work as a technical director at Improving of our Houston office. And as you can see on my business card there, I have many different passions, going from, object-oriented programming, solid principles, all the way down to being a life hacker, using Evernote to organize myself, riding motorcycles, making music. So I have a very fulfilling life as far as I can tell, and it does go beyond just the technical stuff that you're going to be hearing me talk about over the next hour or so. So please reach out, as you see fit. All right, so why should developers care about UX? After all these years, I can tell you that hardly ever, if ever, I've seen a situation where a messy UX has created, good code. Usually, messy UX goes with messy code. If the UX is confusing, is cumbersome, is cluttered, the code is going to follow suit, right? There's just no motivation to write clean code when the UX is a mess. It just goes hand in hand. Counter to that, if the UX is clean, is to the point, is tailored to what the users actually want and need, then the code that we write is going to follow suit. When you have great UX, it's going to lead to happier users. And if we're building software and we are not really concerned with, making users happy, why are we writing software to begin with? Maybe we should be doing something else, right? That's a big thing for me. Features are way easier to implement when you have good UX. Automated tests are easier to write when the UX is clean, because writing automated tests for UX implemented through a complicated UI, people are gonna give up writing tests because it's too hard. Writing clean code becomes much easier when our UX is clean. And then you might say, well, but we already have our UX people doing that. They have to do whatever, I'm just writing code. Well, maybe you should start collaborating with those people, because together, developers and UX, I mean, really in Scrum, UX professionals are also considered developers, because we are building together some sort of product, software, app. So we have to collaborate. And in many cases, like I've worked on one project after like almost 30 years of building software. I've worked in one project where we had a dedicated UX team. That was it. All of the other projects I've ever been in, it was up to the developers to come up with the UX. And if we are only concerned with, oh, am I using JavaScript properly? We are probably missing the mark as far as a good experience to our users. So that's where I come from as a software developer. The examples that you're going to be seeing here, they include screenshots to highlight some of the UX decisions that I've been helping my team make in a project that I've been working on for the last year or so. We're going to take a look at it from a developer's view, because I am not a UX specialist at all. I've given talks such as this one. I started maybe giving this kind of talk 17 years ago or so. I've just recently gone through or came in contact with more experiences around UX. So I'm hoping that I got better over the last maybe 3 years or so in this practice. And I want to share some of that with you all here today. And you're going to see a few samples of how UX can either affect the code that we write or leverage the code that you write. So depending on how you write your code, you can improve your UX just because you're writing better structured, better written code. And I'll show you, what that looks like in a real world project. So one thing that's every single developer has probably said before or thought, even if we didn't say it, that we are trying to write foolproof software, like software that no users, regardless as to how dumb they are going to be able to use this. Because, at the top of our tower, as developers, we think, yeah, all users, they don't know what they are doing. I do, because I'm the brilliant developer. The users don't know anything. Been there, done that, right? And I run into that kind of behavior a lot on a daily basis, not just from developers, even from like stakeholders, company owners who are building something to their users, and they still have this way of thinking of their users. And I think we need to change that perception, because it's very easy for us, like software developers, for example, working on a standing desk or a comfortable chair with big monitors, like 2, 3, 4 monitors in front of us, with nice noise canceling headphones, listening to some, great music, architecting and writing our code, thinking, well, yeah, I'm doing my job so well that the users are going to know exactly what to do. There's no way to make mistakes. When we do things like that and we don't flip the way we're thinking about it, we may be overlooking the fact that the users that we are building software to, they may not have such a nice environment to work. They may have screaming and yelling customers at them, saying, a lot of like bad things, and the users are trying to just get their job done. So at that point, they're probably not looking at the software that we build and thinking, oh, this makes a lot of sense. No, they're listening to people yelling at them. So we do have to take into account the software that we're building. Who are we building it for? And what is the context? Where are they using the software? What kind of environment do they have to face in order to build that? Because, for example, if we're building like this amazing responsive application, but the people using the application are at a warehouse, everybody sharing the same computer in a very loud and dirty environment, and maybe they're like wearing gloves as they're doing their work, probably a responsive, thing that's going to run on a cell phone is not going to work for those users. So we do need to understand those before we write any line of code. And even for users that are like, maybe they're working at a coffee shop with a nice, Mac computer and all, we don't know what they are going through. They may be facing their own challenges, their own hardships that we have to somehow take into account as we build software, right? So for example, everybody runs into this. I know that I run into it a lot, and it does not make me a happy user of software. Going to a screen in some application or website, and there's something that I'm trying to access that is disabled. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why is it disabled right now? Or worse still, it's not disabled. It allows you to go through a bunch of stuff and, key in some data, only for you to hit the submit button and it tells you, oh, you're not allowed to perform this action. Like, well, you've probably known this all along. Why didn't you tell me that before, right? So for example, in this is a snapshot of one of the pieces that I'm working on currently, where, it's an accounting part of the software, and the user can go to the fiscal periods for the year, and then they may want to lock the fiscal year. That's a concept in their business. Maybe the year was like the previous year, they want to lock to make sure that no transactions get put into their general ledger. Then the user goes in there and the lock button is disabled. And maybe the user, just by looking at what's available, the user is like, I was expecting this to be available to me. I want to come in here and lock it. Why is it disabled? I mean, just looking at the screen, I don't know. I don't have enough information for that. So one very key concept that I've learned actually about 2 years ago or so is this idea that as developers, we should anticipate and compensate. Anticipate for questions that the users would ask you if you were there, right? So the user is using your software, and there might be questions that they would like to ask you if you were there. How would you know? Well, probably as you were writing code, you were writing something like, if this thing here and this other thing here, those are questions that you're writing in code. Those questions, the users may be asking the same questions. If there are orders, if the customer does not have pending payments, those questions the users might be asking. We have those in code, the user doesn't. So we need to anticipate those as we are building our software, and we need to compensate for the inability to notice and respond. Because as the user is having those questions, we're not there to see, hey, it looks like you have a question. What is it? We are unable to do that. So we need to account for that. How? Well, think about it. As the person writing the code, you know the questions that you're writing the system for. Every time you use an if or a switch, or you're calling a method somewhere, those are questions that you're asking the system. The user is asking the same questions, right? Besides that, through code, you have access to the data that will allow you to know what questions to ask and how to come up with an answer. You have those questions, those points. So for example, even before going there, what happens when a user goes to a screen where they are expecting something to be enabled or disabled or access to a certain feature? If they can't get to it and they cannot figure it out, what are they going to do? They're going to pick up the phone, call customer support, and then they're going to be waiting, your call is very important to us. Please stay on the line. 10 minutes after that, the users are going to be, mad at whoever picks up the phone. They're going to do a terrible job at explaining what they're trying to do. They're usually just say, yeah, your application sucks. It doesn't do what I want to do. That's it, right? No error message, no context, no nothing. So then it takes, a customer support person to actually calm down the user and try to extract some information. Oftentimes, the customer support is going to go like, yeah, I don't know. Everything sounds about right. Hold on, stay on the line, and then go check with the software developer. Hey, I have this user on the phone. Here's the things that they are reporting. I don't know what to do. Well, the developer is going to go crank the code open, go through the branches of code and say, well, I need some data to reproduce the problem to understand what branch of the code is actually going. That's probably what we would do to then go back eventually to the user and say, oh, you cannot perform that action because X, Y, and Z. It's a long circle. It takes time to actually, make that user happy, right? With that in mind, for that previous feature, what we are doing, the kind of like enable, disable type of logic, if something is disabled, we show a little exclamation mark there. Because the user is like, oh, what is that? Oh, I get information about why can't I access that? Well, you cannot lock the fiscal period because there are fiscal periods in open status and the preceding fiscal year is not locked. This is these are the business rules that we are processing somewhere to decide whether or not that thing is true or false, enable or disabled, visible or invisible, whatever the case might be. As developers, we know those answers. Make it surface to the UI. Right there, with something like this, the user is empowered to understand what's going on. They don't have to call customer support, who doesn't have to call the developers right then and there. So that was like a huge, we showed this to the users, they're like, this is precisely what we need. Some other things that, I actually just skipped this one step here. Do not amplify any confusion. The user may be in a confusing industry, confusing company, may be a confusing person, or may be trying to use a confusing part of the system, like accounting. It's not an easy thing. It can get pretty complex. So for example, on that same screen, instead of showing a lot of options as to what the user can do on the screen, we kind of like only show things based on what the user is trying to do on the screen. So on that one, allow the user essentially to try out, hey, what does this button do? So that the user sees a button and doesn't feel like, oh, I'm not going to click it because I don't want to do anything wrong. Well, let them try it and tell them what's going to happen if they decide to proceed with that feature. So like in this case, as they hover over the different fiscal periods, we display this little lock button because they are allowed, depending on permissions and all, to soft close a period. So when they click that, it's like, oh, what does the button do? Click on it, and we're going to tell you what it's going to do. And then you can decide on your own whether you want to do that or not. So after they click that, we present to them, hey, look, that one little button that you're clicking, if you confirm, right, you continue with this operation, this is going to be the impact to the system. Why is this important? Because they're trying to lock a period in 2022. When they were on the previous screen, they only see information about 2022. They don't see information about 2021. So as a user is trying to accomplish that feature, they may not be asking or they may not be thinking about 2021. As developers, we have access to that data to tell the user, hey, look, you're not looking at 2021. We are looking at it for you. Here's the information you should know. If you close this period in 2022, it's going to affect 2021. Are you okay with it? The user may backtrack and say, no. Oh, that's not at all what I want to do. Hold on. I need to go talk to my supervisor. right? Or it's like, no, this is perfect. This is exactly what I need to do. Go ahead and do the thing. Again, we have the code. We know what the impact of that action is going to be. Surface it up to the user. They're going to just thank you for that, right? We're giving them superpowers, right? They're going to feel empowered using the software that way. After they've done something like that, like in this case, they fulfilled that lock, unlock eligibility for the fiscal year, now that button is enabled. Notice that we also show the little question mark there, because the user may go like, oh, why is this thing unlocked now? Maybe they're just getting started in the whole accounting thing. Again, whoops, we do have that information as to why we've made the decision to give the front end a true, as far as like, is the user allowed to lock this? Yeah, it's not just a true or false. There's a reason behind that. We make it surface so that the user can see that and say, oh, okay, that's how it works. Okay, great, thanks. Doesn't take much. If you look at the, like somewhere in the code, I mean, this looks like it could be C#, it could be JavaScript, it could be TypeScript, right? It's all a C-like language. In our app, it happens to be C# code because we make this kind of business decision in the backend, and then we send it down results to the front end. So in the backend, we have very clean code where we verify the eligibility rules for that operation, locking a fiscal period. We can see what are the rules, is locked, has open fiscal period, preceding year not locked, and the logic that implements that. It's very clear from a developer standpoint to see what those rules are. Well, since we have those rules, we can push it down to the front end and say, here are the rules that we've checked. These are the ones that failed, and it's the reason why the button is enabled or disabled, right? We use tokens for those things because this is going to be an international application. So we do have to take translation of the messages into account. So that's handled someplace else. But the code is written in a clean way that can be leveraged in the UX. So instead of having like a nasty method or function with a whole bunch of nested if blocks that's very convoluted to read, we have it as a rules engine that's very distinct. These are the rules. These are the messages that we want to show to the user in case we fail those rules, right? And we can also improve this to say, well, if the user has this level of rights, we only show the first two rules there. If the user is an accountant admin, then we show all of them. We can make those decisions. We have the code. We do whatever we want there. But the decision of what do we surface to the user, if we can, it's an easy one to do. And again, the users really appreciate that kind of care. So more examples from this app. Navigating large systems. So this app that I'm working is an ERP system. So it's going to grow big. It's going to have like, hundreds, thousands of different features that different users may or may not have access to. So we are building a role-specific UX where some big corporations, they may have users with very distinct roles where they can only do this one thing. Like this guy can only do accounting. This guy can only do sales. This guy can only do purchasing. So we want to create the UX based on those roles. Then we have like smaller companies where you have one user wearing many different hats. So you have one user who can be an accountant, who can be a salesperson, who can be a buyer. Well, now what do we do? Because you have this user who has access to these three things, which means when they go to the UI, it's going to show a whole bunch of stuff that they have access to. There is not a single user who's like a God user like this who wants to see everything they have access rights to. They probably only want to see the features that are applicable to them right now, the one thing that they're trying to do right now. And so we are building a user experience to recognize that. What is the role that you're playing right now? Because you may be an accountant in the morning, and a salesperson in the afternoon. So we're going to allow the user to swap that on the UI and reshape the UI based on that role, as well as what is the task that you are trying to accomplish right now? Because then the UI is going to only show to the user what makes sense for this one task, not for the whole world of what you can do in the app. So for example, in this app, right now it's not complete yet, but the menu on the left is organized on the different areas: sales, purchasing, accounting, operations, inventory. So a user who's a super user may see all of those things there. Over time, it's going to be a large menu to navigate. So we're going to be reshaping that based on the role, but also we are offering to the users a little search box at the top of the screen where they can just type something about the task that they're trying to accomplish. Maybe they're trying to work with orders. It could be sales orders, it could be purchase orders. Let the user type. If the user has access to sales orders in purchase orders, show that to the user and say, hey, do you mean in purchasing or in sales? I'll take you there. You don't have to navigate through the menu structure to find where that is. Tell us, and we're going to do our best to take you where you want to be. Over time, we're going to evolve this so that they could type something like order, hash, or #123. So order number 123, and we're going to go take you straight to order 123, as opposed to go to the menu, sales orders, click on that, and then go to some search screen, type in the number of the order, hit submit. It's like, no, what's the quickest way for the user to get to that order, right? So we are playing with that. We are working with using natural language. Essentially, don't make users guess. Tell them, right? Do not display information on the screen that the user is like, huh, what do they mean by that? Just tell them. Because, more often than not, we know what those things mean. So tell them. So for example, in another part of this app, we have credit sales terms, right? They can enter, net 30 for things that are due in 30 days, 15 days, 16 days, what have you. For some of them, they may offer discount terms, right? If they do offer discount terms, we go ahead and display a little more information. And we ask the user, hey, if discount terms are offered, what's the % off, right? And so what is the thing? And like, what are we accepting here? Like 2 decimal places, this is the format. So that the user does not have to think, okay, do I do the dot? Do I do, it's a whole number? What's the deal here? And when paid within a number of days, whole numbers only. So it reads like discount terms offered, % off when paid within. As the user keys in that information, we still have the natural language during data entry. Offered, % off 10 when paid within 5 days. Even though it's like a data entry part of the screen, it's very natural. Once the user submits that information, now they're not editing the information, they're reading the information. Again, we make the screen read like that. Discount terms, 10% off when paid in, and it should be within 5 days, right? Make it a sentence as opposed to having like a grid, like an Excel spreadsheet type of thing. Translate that into a sentence. Highlight the parts that are important to the user. So instead of showing 10 and 5, tell the user precisely what they are looking at. Give them not just the data, give them the insight. Because again, based on what it is that they are doing at that point in time, their context, are there people around them screaming and yelling? Are they distracted by something else? They may not be fully absorbed by your application. So just tell them, help them a little bit, because even if they are not like reading it out loud, the brain can process that written information in a much better way than just showing 10 and 5, okay? Moving on from that, take what users have. Like users may not have every information handy. I don't know about you, but I dislike software that asks me for a lot of data, allows me to enter part of that data. And then when I hit a roadblock, like, oh, I don't have that piece of information. Hold on, let me go get it. And then it takes you like 20 minutes to find that information. You go back to the screen, it says, your session timed out, start all over. I feel like throwing my computer out of the window, right? So in this application, we have something like that as far as like the amount of data that we need to get from the user when they are onboarding new customers. There's a lot of stuff that they have to enter in the system to be able to say, okay, now the customer is fully onboarded, we can start placing orders for that customer. So we just resorted to the old and well-tested wizard type of situation where they can go through different steps of that wizard that are part of the onboarding process of a customer. They can type whatever they have currently available. By the end of this wizard, they are gonna hit a review screen that's gonna let them know, hey, look, these are the informations that are the information that are either missing or are invalid. They are allowed to save and complete this later so that they can go figure out the rest of the information or go do other tasks that are higher priority right now. Later, they can come back in and just finish the onboarding process without losing all of their data. And maybe they had an emergency, they had to leave. We need somebody else to take on that work. Well, a supervisor type of user in the system could attach or associate this task from one user or move the association from one user to another, right? Because we have the data, the user has already entered that data. Don't discard it, save it, right? Storing data is simple. We've done that a million times. We know how to do that. Keep a hold of it. Again, your users are gonna appreciate that. The old meets the new. A lot of software that I build, like this one, for example, the current users have been using a legacy system for like 20 years now. They are used to things that look like Excel spreadsheets. That's what they are used to, right? They're in their comfort zone. We don't want to come in and write something like state of the art, rock their boat, where their first impression is going to be, I do not like this. It's no, you moved my cheese. You got me out of my comfort zone. Like you just rocked the boat and I'm all wet and it's code. They don't appreciate that. Instead, give them something that somewhat resembles what they're used to. Like if they're used to seeing something that looks like Excel rows and columns, give them that. They're gonna go like, oh, looks slightly different, but yeah, I can find the stuff that I'm looking for. But remember, let them experiment. So like here, we are showing in different screens some extra buttons that they can click to change the way that they are visualizing that screen. So we are introducing to them these concepts so that they can reshape the data that they are seeing based on what is it that they're looking for and what is it that they're trying to do. Because for example, on this screen here, if they are looking for, a customer or a vendor, in this case, that has a specific email, it's very easy to just like scan the email column to find what they're looking for. If on the other hand, they were looking at the name of a vendor, it's like, oh, it's this brown pacocha here. And I wanna hit that button on the right to take an action. Well, that action to like, okay, I found the one that I'm looking for, and then going all the way to the right, they may end up hitting the wrong button. Depending on the size of the screen, the resolution that they have, they may lose track of where they are. Well, if that's what they want to do, maybe having the action close to the vendor is going to make more sense. So then again, on a use case by use case basis, we are working with our stakeholders to understand, okay, when they come here, what is the information that they have at hand? What are they looking for? And what are they going to be doing with what they find? Are they going to be taking actions on that? Or they just want to see some information? What is that information? So that we can like maybe show it in bigger font, with different colors, put some like neon lights on top of the thing that's most likely what they're looking for, right? Instead of just, you know, giving them the grid and that's all they get. Creating task-based UIs is another thing that we are very big on. So instead of having the typical CRUD, create, retrieve, update, delete type of screen that everybody creates all the time, because it's what closely resembles, you know, Excel spreadsheets that people are always asking for. We can do better than that. Think of the UI based on not all of the data that the user can enter or view, you know, at different points in time, like a customer screen, where you show all the information there is to know about the customers. Well, chances are that when users are going to that screen, they don't want to see everything. There's something very specific that they want to see and do based on context. What is that? Identify that. So consider things like, what is the one thing the user wants to do now? Not everything the user can do ever. What information do they have at hand? Do they have a social security number? Do they have the last name of the person and the last four of the social? Do they have a passport number? Do they have a driver license? What is it that they have? Different users from different departments may have different things. One department may have the passport number. Another department may have the driver license. Take those into consideration because those are the most important pieces of information that those different users will have. So adjust the UX based on that kind of information. Are they trying to make a decision? What is that decision? How can we empower them to make a conscious decision? If the decision is, oh, they just want to dump it into Excel. It's like, okay, take a step back right now. If they're dumping that into Excel, it's probably because they're going to massage that data to then make a decision. Ask, how are you going to be using that data in Excel? Are you going to be creating a chart? You know, are you going to pivot that data around? Tell me, because depending on what it is, we may just give you the data and the insight precisely the way you're going to get in Excel, right? They may not have that answer. They may say, no, I'm still creating a model. I want to dump it into Excel so I can create different models and figure out what exactly do I need. That's totally fine, right? But you have to have this kind of conversation. Are they trying to perform a task based on what the system tells them, right? What is the task? And like one approach, for example, is there is a part of the system that I'm working on where users at a warehouse are using the system, right? They are going through the warehouse and they may need to like count how many items of a given lot they may have there. Like, okay, lot X, Y, and Z is a lot of you know, boxes of bananas. How many of those do we have? Have we received? Have we sold? Are we shipping? It's the kind of person or role using the system. It's very specific to them that there are times when they may need to change the quantity on hand of a certain item. Well, what are the use cases? Because one could say, oh, just give me an editable grid where I can go in, just, you know, type in a cell how many items on hand we have. That would be one way to do it. Another way is to ask the user, tell me the situations in which you need to change that number. And then what we heard is something like this. Well, maybe we've received something from a vendor and one of the boxes is broken. We cannot sell that product. Okay, so you need to decrease your lot quantities by a given number. So I want to decrease it by one box because I cannot use. So it's like, oh, okay, you don't have to like necessarily do the math, like count how many you currently have and add it to the system. You just want to say decrease by one. Or you may, they might say, we're walking around the warehouse and underneath a table, we found an extra box of bananas. We have no idea where it came from. Okay, so you want to increase the quantity by one box. Or in another case is, we've sold most of this lot. I can visually see how many boxes we have. We have 5 right now. I don't want to do math. I just want to go in and say we have 5. So we want to adjust the quantity to 5. Okay, is that it? Are those all the cases for you to want to change that number? They said yes. All right, so here's what we're going to give you: a task-based UI, where you're going to select. So from the previous screen, right, they find the lot they're looking for. They click the little icon there, which is going to bring this UI here. It's a lot adjustment for that lot. These guys, they usually think of the item in terms of a code as opposed to the name of the item. They're used to that. That's what they have available. And then we show them, hey, this is currently what we have on hand on the system, right? And then you can indicate whether it's an increase by a given quantity, a decrease by a given quantity, or adjust to a given quantity. Again, don't make the user think, because you might say, oh, that's simple math. Not if you're like running back and forth at the warehouse with a lot of people asking you a bunch of stuff, right? You have to take those things into account. By having something like this to them, there isn't a whole lot that they have to think. They have to think, okay, are we increasing, decreasing, adjusting to? Are we putting in the quantity? What is the reason? Oh, it's a damaged product. It's spoiled. We found the product. Maybe an optional comment that you want to put in there, and you hit adjust. Very minimalistic UI, very simple for the users to use, very simple to implement, because that's a form with 4 fields, right? As opposed to having, all of those, imagine that, all of those fields: quantity on hand, quantity available to sell, quantity allocated, quantity due in allocated. And there's like 3 or 4 that we're not yet showing on this screen. Imagine showing all of those cells to the user, and the user goes like, well, should I change the quantity available to sell? Should I change the quantity allocated? What do I do now? It's like, no, just focus on the one thing at hand, the one use case at hand. A case for this feature that I was just showing, end-to-end tests. So what you're going to see here is some code that is an end-to-end test written in Cypress.io to exercise the user interface of this product that we are building. It describes the user experience, not the implementation of the feature. It does not describe, well, I have a button and I have a text box and I have a label. That it does not talk about those things. It talks about the user experience. So it has a little bit of a setup, right? So it says, hey, we are in inventory lots and we're wanting to do an inventory adjustment. These are the permissions that the user need in order to accomplish this kind of task. And then from there on, it's a description of the feature. Given the list of inventory lots, when I select to adjust a lot, notice that it doesn't tell us if it's a drop down, if it's a grid. It just say, when I select, right? Then I see the lot adjustment screen, the one we were just looking at. And I select the increase quantity by a number. I select an adjustment reason: damaged, spoiled, we found the product. And I enter some comments. When I submit the adjustment, notice it doesn't say when I click the submit button. It's when I submit the adjustment, because it could be by clicking on a button, by hitting enter, by hitting a shortcut, by blinking their eye, because now we do, face recognition, by doing a gesture. It doesn't matter. What the user is trying to do is to submit that lot adjustment. Then I see a confirmation message. Again, if it's a pop-up, something at the top in a toast message, doesn't matter. And I see options to return to my workflow. Oh, do you want to go back to that screen? Do you want to go someplace else, which might be the next action that they want to do? The very end, we split that because we do want to exercise the UI to make sure that once they are done with that, the UI is going to make an API call to the backend. And we are verifying the contract of that API? Is the UI producing the output that we want sent to the backend, right? So then again, it may look very odd to you. This is just, in this case, TypeScript. It could be JavaScript, but you see English there. We are talking about what the user needs, not how the developers are going to implement the feature, because then that gives us the freedom to implement the feature however we want, as long as the outcome satisfies this set of requirements. When we look at the a little bit of the front end code here, this is an Angular application. So somewhere here in the TypeScript code, in this case, we have an interface that describes, that documents that UI that we are creating, right? So it has, okay, what is the method? Are we increasing, decreasing, or adjusting to a certain number? What is the quantity? What are the comments? What is the adjustment reason that the user has selected on the screen? How many on hand? Those are information that we're showing to the user. So it's a very small contract that the UI has to satisfy to fulfill the requirement. Someplace else in the code, we grab that information and we make an API call, right? That's your typical TypeScript, JavaScript, it doesn't matter. So you have the UI, the UX, right? You have the test that describes it. You have a contract on the client side that gathers that information. You have the call into the backend that actually performs the business operation. As we flip over to the backend side of things, in this case, we have a C# code, is a .NET backend. We have the counterpart to it. We have a route that receives that call. It's the API route, right? That has a create adjustment command that comes in, the adjust lot. That is the server, the backend counterpart of what we see on the UI, right? Is a contract for adjusting a lot. We need the number, we need the method, we need the quantity, the comments, and the adjustment reason, right? So we map the two. So the team discusses, hey, for that task that we are creating some UI for, this is the contract. The UI is going to collect this information from the user, is going to send it over to the following endpoint. The backend will implement that endpoint, and the command, it will receive a command fed by the UI, and then it's going to do its thing. How it does the thing, it doesn't matter for this conversation, right? But it keeps things clean from the UX into the UI, through the front-end code, all the way down to the backend, right? Moving on from there, and we're almost ready to wrap up and open up for questions. Think of what the user is thinking when they are presented with options. Like for instance, in this website here, the user is presented with a series of color options, right? And then they see here at the bottom, there is a load more button, right? Which everybody here on the call can infer, you know, what that button does when the user clicks on it. Now, when a user is here, do you really think that they're thinking, oh, I want to load more? No, they are not. Developers are thinking it that way. Oh yeah, when the user clicks here, we need to load more data from the backend. That's not what the user is thinking. The user is thinking, I want to see more. Do we have more options? I would like to see them, please. Right? Because when you have a button like this, you could think, well, if they click load more, it's going to show more stuff. Do we want to have that button like have a counter action so that it's going to collapse that? So what would that say then? Load more, load less, or unload more? It doesn't make any sense. What the user wants is to see more, see less. That's what how normal people think, right? And the funny thing is that I got this load more from a UX designer, right? Because as developers, we have taught people to think in those terms. we did a disservice to the users, right? So it's the kind of conversation that's like, okay, let's not use this kind of technical language in our user experience, because that's not what the users are thinking, okay? Next point here, before we reach the ending part of the talk, watch your language. And what I mean by that, let's say you have like in this screen mockup, like a sales order screen. At the bottom, you see your typical usual suspects. Everybody creates screens that will have a cancel button, a delete button, a save button. And they're used not in the best manner. I'll tell you why. I pick up the phone, I'm a salesperson, I pick up the phone, I'm talking to a customer, the customer says, hey, I need to make a change to my sales order XYZ or sales order, you know, whatever number they say. I pop a sales order screen, and then I realize, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, I got the wrong one. Hold on, let me cancel this. Meaning I want to cancel this UI dialog, but then the customer on the other end says, no, I don't want to cancel my order. And then I say, no, I didn't mean cancel your order. I mean canceling my action. You see the confusion there. So then when the user does call or the customer does call to cancel an order, what do we call that button? If we're using the cancel to say, I want to get out of this screen, when there is a business action called cancel, because customers will call and say, hey, I would like to cancel my order. Then what do we name that button? Cancel is already taken, right? Well, we could say, name this one dismiss, right? Discard, like, oh, no, dismiss this dialogue. That's not what I want to do. It would be more appropriate, right? What about the delete? Well, isn't the delete what we should be using for cancel since the customer does not want the order anymore? Well, think about it. Have you ever heard any customer call up a place and say, yes, hi, good afternoon. I would like to delete my order. Who talks like that other than developers? Nobody calls a business place to say, I would like to delete my order. Oh, I just placed my sales order. I would like to delete it. No, it does not work like that. They're going to call it and say, I would like to cancel. That's a business operation. Delete is not a business operation. Destroying data in a backend, in a database, that is a technical thing. In many businesses, destroying data is against the law, right? Oh, but what if it's a soft delete? You know, we're just adding technical details to the interpretation, right? Well, what if I used to sell this product and now I don't sell it anymore? I want to delete it. No, maybe you want to discontinue the product. That's probably how the business talks about that. They want to discontinue a product. So have a discontinue button, not a delete button, because for historical reasons, you need to keep the data there. You may not want to show it in most places, but when your accounting goes in, they may want to see those records, right? So think about that. Saving, right? Is the data drowning and you need to save it? From a sales order perspective, I'm a salesperson, I'm talking to another salesperson here and say, hey, I have this customer on the phone. They're almost giving up on the sale. Can you help me save this sale? That's what saving a sales order would probably mean in this context. Well, but now you have save on the screen. What does that mean? Well, it means that I need to persist that to a permanent storage. Do users or customers actually say that, hey, I would like to persist my sales order to a permanent storage? They don't talk like that. They would say, hey, I'm ready to place my order. Okay, great. Or I'm ready to submit my order to the warehouse, right? In that case, submitting an order is a business operation, right? So thinking along those lines, several like modern applications, they don't have a save button. They just keep saving it and they tell the user, hey, don't worry about it. It was last saved like a minute ago or so, right? Let the user know, like, keep doing your thing. We're taking care of your stuff. You're entering data. We're saving it for you, right? We're not necessarily like pushing it through the business system because the data may be invalid as it currently stands. But we're keeping it for you. If your computer, breaks, you can go over to another computer and you're going to see your data there, because you're not just keeping it in your browser. We're actually persisting it so that you run out of battery, just find another computer and pick it up from where you left off, right? So things along those lines. And to wrap this up, a good UX can only come from good user stories, right? If the user stories are not good, if the conversations are not had around the experiences and the behaviors that we're trying to build, there's no good UX coming out of it. So any kind of good code, good UX come out of good user stories, and more importantly, good conversations around the stories. But that's topic for an entire separate talk that I have just on creating effective user stories, which, if there's interest in the group, just let me know. I would be more than happy to give that talk to you guys. But other than that, let me open up for questions, comments, concerns, because I've been talking a lot. My apologies.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Claudio, for giving us an entire overview about user experience and letting us know, like, we have to know the environment where our users work so that we should be able to develop software accordingly, and using task-based UX is all good to implement. So now I'll open the floor for questions. Feel free to ask Claudio your questions.
Don't be shy. Make sure to unmute yourself.
Cool. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay. As long as so I have one question, Claudio.
Sure.
So you displayed some end-to-end test, right? So is there any preferred framework or preferred testing solution that you use, or so what is that you use today to write your E2E test?
Today we are using Cypress.io, right? Cypress.js.io, or whatever the official name is, where you can use either JavaScript or TypeScript to write your tests in. It automates the browsers. It's similar to Selenium, right? So it allows you to automate the browser and exercise the UI of your application, through automated tests. And we are using it heavily for a part of our tests. We still have a lot of unit tests on the front end, on the back end. We are very strong believers in automated tests and practices like behavior-driven development, test-driven design. We follow all of those things. And as far as the end-to-end tests are concerned, we decided to go with Cypress. We've been using it for the last year and a half, and we're very happy with it. It works, very well with the approach that we are taking to write those tests. In the past, I have used SpecFlow a little bit. I have used Cucumber 12 years ago when I was doing a lot of Ruby on Rails.
Right.
I got to learn Cucumber. So really the tool is not necessarily what matters, but it's the practice. Because you can use the most amazing tool there is. If you don't have a good practice, if at the end of the day, your user stories, your acceptance criteria does not read well in English, there's no tools that's going to save you. That's my point, right? Get the English part first right, then we think about tools. If you're at that point where it's yeah, now I'm starting to look at tools, Cypress is one. Like I said, I've been using it in this project heavily for about a year and a half now, and I'm very happy with it.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely.
And we do have both myself and some folks here at Improving who give talks on writing tests in Cypress. So let me know if it's interesting for the group, and I can hook you up. It can be either myself giving the talk, or I have some of my coworkers who can also give the talk.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, if there are no more questions, I think you can always reach out to Claudio if there are any further follow-up questions. So I have a call to action to this group today. So as you all know, we conduct JavaScript and Friends conference every year. And this year we are conducting it at Columbus, Ohio on July 29th. So feel free to spread the word. We currently have our CFP open, and you are always welcome to apply to speak, and we also welcome speakers at all experience levels. So we look forward to meet you this year. So help us spread the word. And thanks for joining this meetup today. And you can also watch this talk in our YouTube channel later if you want to revise the content from this talk today. Yep. Thank you all. Thanks for joining today.
Outstanding. Thank you. Bye, everybody.